Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Reusable Design and Development, Strategies for Leveraging the Application. Before we begin, I'd like to cover just a few items regarding this webinar platform. At the bottom of your screen, you'll notice a handful of widgets, mainly the Q&A widget, which you can utilize to submit any questions you have throughout today's webinar session. We will be answering all questions at the end after the wrap-up of the presentation. For viewing purposes, you can also expand your viewing window by clicking on the icon found on the top right corner of the slide viewer. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the Help widget. And lastly, do take a moment to fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. Thank you. At this time, I'll turn it over to your presenter, Suresh.
Thank you, Valerie, and hello, everyone. So in the session today, in the webinar today, we're going to be talking about building reusable design and development system, and how do you use design system to design and develop at scale. So we'll be covering, introduction, a little bit about the speakers. We'll be talking about the practice within the digital innovation that we belong to, and then we'll be talking about the team structure for making this design system happen, our approach, a couple of customer stories, and then talk a little bit on the design system's ROI. So with that, I jump on to the introduction where, about the speakers. So I'm Suresh Kandiban, a lead user experience architect, belong to strategy and design practice within digital innovation. And then I have a co-speaker with me who's Adam Basie. He's the practice director for strategy and design based out of Chicago. So within digital innovation, we have multiple pillars, and one of those being strategy and design. And within strategy and design, we operate or we think the problem or solutions that we provide in these three pillars, like as you see. So we do digital strategy, where we do design thinking, service designing, and all the product strategy development and all that stuff. And then next comes the experience design, where we do the user research activity, and that's where the craft actually happens in terms of, say, creating wireframes, creating visual designs, and all of that. And then comes the design management, where we would do the design systems, the design operations, and design maturity part of it. So design system is what we are going to be talking about right now, and design ops and maturity is related to other services where we work with the clients to understand the different, the UX maturity of the organization and how one can be scaled from level 1 to level 5 and all that. So I'm going to be talking about the design systems here. So before we actually dive deep into the definition of design systems, let's discuss a few terminologies as it relates to design systems. So the first thing to start with is the style guide. So the style guide is something that contains information about how things should be done consistently across web application, product, or a suite of products or websites. So the common type of style guide as it relates, say, brand guideline, UX, style guide, and then content style guide. So the brand guide or the brand design relates to elements like fonts, colors, trademark, etc. And then the UX style guide tells design directions, visual and interaction design sets. And content style guide are also effective, which defines the language and the tone of voice that used throughout the application or in the product. So usually the style guide appears in a format of a PDF or in a document that lives in a static medium, sometimes in an intranet and stuff like that. And just thinking about an organization that's working across different products or different teams and all that, the concept of managing the style guide becomes a nightmare, right? So that brings in a lot of document management issues, since there are different teams that's working on different things and all that stuff. And usually, style guide is created or, based on the maturity of the organization. Some organizations just go with, having a style guide in place and using that to guide the, design directions. So next comes the pattern library. So pattern library takes the style guide to the next level, right? Or the elements within the style guide to the next level, where pattern library encompasses the forms, the buttons, the interactions, basically when you take a button, there could be different states of the button, right? The press state, hover state, the different scalability of the buttons and all of its kind. So, and also the pattern library talks about when to use certain element and when not to use certain element, like how to use certain element, how not to use certain elements. So the pattern library houses all of that information. So usually all the designs that make it to the pattern library are tested with the users, based on all the research, artifacts, or based on all the research findings. So everything that makes it to the pattern library is really tested and ready to use. So in theory, when you have a pattern library out there, it is as simple as just, utilizing the components or utilizing the form field elements part of the pattern library and just starting, straight away into the designs, right? Into the making of the design. And then, and also, before jumping onto the component library, on the pattern library, they're the ones who defines, the visual interactions and the interactive aspects of the components and all that. And this is usually seen in organizations that have good understanding of UX. And then, back to the component library, which is really the UI patterns in a coded format. So this is more on the dev side, the front-end dev side, where they can go to this component library and pull any coded components that they need for them to build an application, right? It could be the forms, it could be the buttons, it could be like anything. So the component library is really the UI patterns in a coded format. And everything that lives within the component library is, again, very similar to the pattern library. The code is tested, the code is reviewed, and it just provides a head start for someone that's ready to start building an application. It just really makes it fast. So thinking about the design system now, right? So we talked about the style guide, we talked about the pattern library, we talked about the component library. So thinking about the design system, it is really the complete set of design standards, documentations, and principles, along with the toolkit, which is the UI patterns and components to achieve those standards. So this is really central to the organization that's governing and managing, right? So really the whole organization is involved in making a design system because this requires different stakeholders to be part of it, right? So there should be a dev participation, there should be a technical architect participation, there should be a designer participation, business and whatnot. So this is so central to the organization, and the whole organization is involved in making a design system. It requires multiple cross-functional teams to actively work together to create and maintain such a design system. So with this basic understanding of the different terminologies and the different components of design system, let's now get into the definition of design system. So the idea of the design system is to provide a single source of truth for the whole product team, right? For the whole organization to be able to design better and build faster. So it is really build faster because not only the designers will have readily tested and available designs to use for the projects, but also for the developers from a code perspective, they would have the UI components built already that's ready to use. So it just makes it faster for them to create something, and also creativity and consistency at scale, because as part of this design system, in the making of design system, we would really be thinking about take a single element, be it button again, right? Because that's most common interface that we all use and click on like every day. So the scalable issues of the scalability of how the button should scale on a mobile device, on a tablet, on a desktop, on a large viewport. So all of that is being accounted for as part of this design system. So when you have a design system, you are essentially building, or you essentially have a scalable framework that's ready to be used on any new projects. So talking about how is this a rising challenge, right? So more and more companies exist today is really successful, and their presence is dictated by the customer experience that the companies provide. And from the user perspective or the customer perspective, they do not view organization as silos, right? So they do not view organization silos from the perspective of let's say a company has different products. they don't experience company as, say, product 1, product 2, product 3, right? So they experience company as a whole. So this makes it more important for someone to be thinking about, since customer experience the company as a company and not as a product, it becomes absolutely important for someone to be thinking about consistency across products, right? So the more and more customers start to experience the product as a company itself, it becomes a design's rising challenge, right? So though the company has multiple teams focused on making different products, the idea is to create a consistent experience across those products to meet that customer experience of them viewing company as one single thing, right? So with this design system in place, it really saves a lot of time for someone to to make sure things are consistent without having to go through a bunch of documentation, without having to go through and refer to existing applications. Are they making the same set of patterns? Are they creating a new set of patterns and things like it? So it really saves a ton of time for people that are working on project to achieve that consistency. And also, as part of the design operations that would typically exist within the organizations, it just makes it easier for them to focus on the new things that they wanted to deliver, instead of just focusing on fixing the design bugs, that is not addressing that is addressing the inconsistencies and stuff like that. So if you look at the visuals on the right, so this really talks about the more and more people are really spending time on managing existing existing design standards, documentation, all that, as opposed to spending time on new feature development, right, which really adds to the value of the business. So the inconsistency in the user experience, it impacts trust, both from the customer confidence and also in the employee satisfaction perspective. So keeping consistency among user interactions patterns will help instill the trust. So beyond the trust, beyond trust and scale, a design system should address the usability issues, including accessibility, for example, right? So a design system can provide a single source outlining and addressing accessible components, ensuring all experience across a company portfolio is compliant. So when we have consistent user experiences and a fast start with a system like, say, design system, it just makes it super helpful, for the dev team to just jump on and start developing, creating something, and it reduces the development and deployment overload as well. So thinking about the scalability aspect, yes, so the design system is built in such a way, it is providing a scalable framework for people to use. And as the business start to emerge, right, so as the business start to emerge with the need to provide access through multiple channels, with the need to be scalable across different viewports and all that. So this concept of design system is going to be is going to make it extremely super fast and helpful for people to quickly get things fast. And extending that the concept of consistency across products, it also makes us to think about the scalability, right? The scalability from the perspective of the product being accessible across different channels. So this graph clearly shows how the device landscape kind of grew from 2000 to 2000, right? So those are the initial days when we had just the desktop solutions, and people just focus on desktop, and that's okay if you provide good experience on that. But these days, with the plethora of devices that's out there, you have to make sure you provide consistent experience for the same product across different devices, right? I mean, across tablet, across watch, across mobile phone, you name it, right? So every devices that's coming out in the market requires requires optimized experience for the users and also the expectation is to have the better experience across devices. So designing at scale becomes absolutely important. So the design system really solves for all the inconsistencies, right? So it builds a scalable framework of repeatable and reusable components. So going back to our initial discussions on the design system as a whole, on how it's made in terms of the component level, the forms, buttons, fields, and all that, it is available, right? So you don't have to create anything from scratch when you have a design system, because that houses everything that the designers and the developers would need for them to build an application. So in the later slides, we have a couple of examples that we will walk you through and talk about in terms of the design systems that we have built for our clients. And we will actually go dive into the different principles and the approach of taking the principles and then starting to identify the inventory of the design system items and all of that. So we'll dive into that a little later. But on this particular slide, as you see, a design system builds a scalable framework of repeatable and reusable components across all of these, right? So we would have established branding guidelines, right? We would have the layouts, components, and patterns, motion, like as you see here. And then on the visual side of things as well, you'd have iconography, typography, copy and voice on the content style guides like we talked about, and also the code part of it. And the design system, the whole idea of the design system is to stay as a single source of truth, which encompasses everything, right? Design system is a go-to place for someone to look at what are the principles that is driving the designs, that is driving the customer experience. So if you take material design as an example, all of the components and everything that they have out there is driven by the core principle of material is a metaphor, using motion to convey the meaning, and likewise, right? So if you take Spotify as an example, their principles are really around making things relevant, making things human, and making things unified. So each and every design system that's out there operate based on our philosophies and based on the principles that actually drives the creation of the design system components. So this is the single source of truth. So when someone is trying to access the design system for a specific component, the philosophy and guidelines kind of educate them on why systems are built in such a way, right? Why motion is not the primary primary criteria for a design system. So because that's something that the team, the whole organization settles on when they make the design system. So it's all guided by the philosophy and guidelines. And then the UX and UI standards is pretty much based on those philosophy and guidelines. And this is just a repeat of everything that we just discussed in terms of all the development components, all the frameworks, forms, pretty much everything is based on all of that, and it just pretty much exists there, right? So it's all about people to take it and start consuming, and also on the agnostic components, pretty much on the front end development side. So with that, we'll just jump on to talk about the approach of what is the design system journey, right? So the design system journey has two big parts to it, right? So one is defining the framework, and second is implementing the framework. So the creation of a design system happens through two different phases, like as you see here. So starting with defining the framework, so that's where we would meet as a team to start understanding and assessing the maturity of the organization. So how mature the organization is, because that's going to educate what's the best suggested or possible approach for someone to think about in creating a design system. So is that an organization that is internationally across the globe, or is that an organization that's focused on a specific region or geography, or things like that, right? So based on all of the parameters and based on the maturity of the organization, we would just start with identifying the philosophy and the principle that should drive or guide the design system. So in this case, it's really about identifying, back to what I was saying, who the users are, right? So what are the different teams that's going to consume the design system? So what is that the organization is going to be, perceived or want to be perceived from a customer perspective, right? So everything drives the creation of the design system. So it all starts with identifying the philosophy and the principle. And based on that, we would just start creating the visual language and brands, and then comes the components and start creating the templates, and then comes the asset libraries, documentation, and then the governance. So this is a journey that, like as you see, based on different parameters that we just talked about, it follows the series of steps like this for something to happen. And also in the creation of the design system, it doesn't have to be big bang, right? It doesn't have to be big bang. So the idea is to start building something, demo something early so that the people start to realize the return on investment early, right? So you don't really have to spend like months and months of time for you to make a complete fleshed out design system. You could just start with one of the most commonly used template, or one of the most commonly used layout, one of the most commonly used design element on the page, right? It could be as simple as a button. So the idea is to start building that and then start showing that as early and as often for you to get enough feedback from the customer on is that working, right? So how do we improvise a process, or what should be the better governance about making or updating or managing the design system. So the idea is to show it early, get feedback, and refine as needed. And then here is our approach in terms of kind of what I talked about in the previous slide, where we would work with the client or work with the customer, starting with doing some sort of a workshopping sessions with them, where we would just do an envisioning session, identifying what the client needs are, identifying who the users are, identifying the geographic location and whatnot, right? So we would just go through the phase of preparation, and then doing a bit of client questionnaire. We'd just send them a client questionnaire document to capture all of the specific pain points that they have, the specific solution that they have in mind, the frameworks that they would like to use, and kind of technique, the ecosystem of the organization. So with that, we jump on to the envisioning session, where we would facilitate a session with them to kind of solve some sort of design thinking sessions with them to address, is this the right approach, right? So talking about the framework from a technical standpoint, is that a feasible thing to do it? Or what is going to take from the cost and time perspective? So can we measure the ROI early as opposed to like late? So a lot of things would be discussed as part of this envisioning or design thinking session, and the outcome of that is going to be a prioritized set of features or the components that we also would like to focus on, right? So back to the demo early and test early idea. So the idea is to come up with that prioritized set of features that helps you focus on, here are the things that we're going to first start with for us to prove that the design system is really working and helping the organization. And outcome is pretty much the same thing, where it's really about aligning everyone within the organization based on what we are trying to achieve and what we wanted to prove and all of that stuff. So jumping onto the design system participant, hey Adam, are you there? So yeah, just taking a pause for to check if the co-speaker joined.
Yep. Can you hear me, Suresh?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. I had some technical difficulty. So thanks for getting us to this point, Suresh. I think it's really important, Suresh, if you want to go back to slide 16 for me. Or okay. I can do that here.
Sure, yeah. I just don't.
This design journey that Suresh was talking about here, it's really important to notate, like, there's this idea of defining the framework and implementing the framework, right? And there are lots of different categories that make an overarching ideal design system, such as design philosophy, visual language of brand, components, asset libraries, documents, governance, etc. Right? So in order for something to be fully functional and really well-oiled, you're going to want all of these. But that doesn't mean you have to start with all of them at once. You can do this incrementally, or you can do a slice of each one as you go along the way, right? So it's really important to define the framework based on, how many different products you have, what kind of solutions you're doing, how many devices you have, whether you're doing iOS, whether you're doing native, just a web-based design system. There are all kinds of things to think about there. So it's really important that in this next slide, right, when we talk about the envisioning session, one of the ways we come in with the clients at first is to first kind of just sit down and go through this process, like Suresh said, some design thinking to understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish and trying to solve, and then identify that MVP, that minimal viable product, or you might think of it as a proof of concept. So to validate that the design system will work, put it into place with all the different participants, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and things like that, before you start to scale up to a much larger design system. Because a design system is way larger, as Suresh mentioned in some of the earlier slides, than just a style guide, right? It's reusable assets, it's reusable components, it's reusable motion libraries, the whole 9 yards. So in this next section, we're going to talk a little bit about the design system participants. So there's other models out there that you could look up. I do think that these are sort of to the core one. A centralized system is where one team or a collection of single users manage the design system and push things out to a couple, maybe a few product teams, or maybe it's just focused on one product. And that works really well for a smaller organization, a smaller system. A lot of times, though, when you get into bigger, larger organizations, by default, the system itself, right, lives in the middle. Waiting for some background noise to pass there. The system itself lives in the middle, right? But you might have multiple people on different product teams who are, quote unquote, tagged as participating owners of the system, right? Who need to meet regularly to understand, how and when to update the design systems. Have different marketing teams or business teams introduce new features or products, right? There's a governance aspect with the design system that says, hey, should this new component, could someone mute? Should this new component be considered to be actually implemented into this? So what a design system doesn't do is eliminate innovation or testing. Like, there's still aspects of testing out something new across different channels or products. And then if it's successful, it may be something that the design team or the governance team structures consider something to move into the design system, right? And so that can be done by the centralized team or an operating group of people in a federated system there. So would you add anything to that, Suresh?
Yeah, good. And yeah, sorry, yeah,
Okay.
One thing to add. So governance is so important that, without the governance, sometimes it could even fail this whole concept of design system, right? Because the system is something that should be living, breathing. So there should be a team that's really focused on managing it, because, the managing from the perspective of, is that following the latest trend in the market, right? So is that really helping out the users, right? So based on the new devices that's coming out, should we enhance the existing set of features or functionalities that we have built? The existing components that we have built to account for the new user needs and also the business needs. So this governance is so important. Thank you for that, Adam. Yeah, just wanted to add those.
Yeah. So as Suresh said, it's not set it and forget it. Right? It's an evolving system that should evolve with your brand. It should evolve with what you're seeing in the marketplace. And so that in order to do that, you need smart designers and decision makers in a particular specific structure that you decide upon that works with not only from the way your team operates, but it's specifically the tool set you're using is a huge part of the governance as well. So some companies are using Abstract, some are using Envision DSM. If you want to ask us some questions about the different tools that people are using to do design systems, there's, some people build them completely from scratch, et cetera. So this next slide here, design system users. So this is, again, a generic set of users, but I would consider these the different core users. Typically someone involved in utilizing the design system and also governing it. Is a creative director, such as myself or Suresh, the product owner itself. The product owner of the product usually has a lot of subject matter expertise on, why a product is in the market, which should inform the way we build our design system. The user researcher and designer, the one that's going to have a lot of the expertise on the patterns and the components and the motion and whatnot, and the developer and the engineer. Like, a design system does not exist without technical feasibility as well. And front-end developers bring a lot to the table in terms of the actual control libraries. A lot of design systems are actually built on what are called control libraries, and they are a set of existing components, whether they be React components or Angular components or basic web bootstrap components, that are then modified by the design team, right, to kind of stand up your design system to meet the product needs and things like that. It's really important to say that creating a design system from scratch without a control library would be an immense effort in itself. So a couple customer stories. Would you add anything to that, Suresh?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, this is good, Adam. Thank you.
So a couple customer stories here is that we worked with a large beverage manufacturer, and in this particular case study, I can talk about who they are. This was Anheuser-Busch, and the other one was just a large airline, which I cannot mention that client name. So the first one here was with Anheuser-Busch, right? The name we chose for it was Master ABI Layout Template, I think was the name we called it. Malt, and malt is, a big component in brewing beer, so that's it was kind of a fun name. But in this particular case, Anheuser-Busch has different zones, I think 9 different global zones, and it's probably changing day to day, across the world, right? And a lot of times, there are different vendors, such as Insight, right? That come in to work with ABI, and there's also ABI internal teams, right? And what happens is you get different organizations, not just different product teams, different organizations coming in and recommending that an internal, and by the way, this was for an internal application, right? Not their customer-facing stuff, but thousands and thousands and thousands of people affected by this particular design system internally at Anheuser-Busch. Where was I going with this? So the 9 different global zones, like different organizations coming in, and when you've got different product teams and different developers or different user researchers, everybody's coming in and proposing different ways to solve the problem, right? So that's fine, but when you solve that problem, right, and you've got all these different organizations building applications in the way they think they should look and feel and operate, you get a lot of inconsistency for the internal ABI folks who are with these internal systems built by these other organizations, or themselves for that matter. So what we did is one of the global mobility leads come in and said, hey, we need a design system so that when all these other vendors come in, or even our own internal staff, they are building the applications for our internal use based on a set of standards and criteria, aka the malt design system. So I'm going to try to share my screen right now real quick and show. Suresh, I'm getting a little freezing on my computer. Are you able to?
Yes. So I will share the screen.
No, I've got it now, Suresh.
Okay.
All right. So screen 1. Let's do screen 2. Okay, can you all see this? Are you able to see that? I think it just appeared.
Yes, Adam. It's working fine. Please go ahead.
Okay. All right. Sorry, there's a little delay here. Apologies for that. But I'll keep this fairly short. Here's an example. This is not the latest and greatest. This was, I think, halfway through the project, so this is not the live version. But this is a very, what I would consider a pretty far along version of the design system that was built for ABI. For example, right, the level of detail that we went down. For example, I'm in the component section over here, right? So things, activity indicators, autocomplete, button group, card, box. So these are the components we've been talking about, right? We built the system for web. For iOS, if you notice, there's a slight change in the artifacts and a slight change in the interaction. I don't know how well that animation is coming through, but this is animating in a GIF-like format, as well as Android. But for example, on the web side, one thing that happens is there's typically an example of the component that's live and acting, the color for the different states, right? Enabled, hover, focus, press. All of this stuff matters. And like when you pick up an app on your phone and you're like, wow, this feels really nice. It's because somebody thought through all these different states. They didn't just put a square on the screen and have it be a link, right? Different variations, the things that everything down to the sizing, the do's and do not, right? Internationalization. Also, a really important thing to note here is we also built the actual code, right, for the thing. So if I open up in Playground, for example, Give it just 1 second here, Paul. So because I'm having so much of a delay here, guys, I'm not going to click around in this too much. But one of the important things that makes a design system actually usable is a design system is not a style guide, right? Like there needs to be development aspects of code behind the scenes. So now, for each component, there's different packages here and wrappers and the components themselves. Developers to actually make modifications or manipulations or tweaks that, if needed throughout the design system. So I'm going to switch back over here. Just for another example here. So if we go over to foundations, some other aspects that Suresh mentioned earlier, such as brand. We went through a phase in that envisioning session we talked about earlier where we talked about, their manifesto, and all of these things, these philosophies, brand, copy, voice, and tone, all play a role into how the design system is created, which, even influences things such as typography, right? Everything down to the nitty-gritty here. So I'm going to switch back over to the presentation now. But hopefully that was a decent example of the actual, and you guys can see the slideshow now, right? Suresh?
I think yes.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so that was an example of ABI Anheuser-Busch. Another example was for a very large airline we used. So I don't have a live example of this, but as you can see, similar approach, a little bit different look and feel to the actual design system itself. But the screenshots here representing a loader, a color, mobile dialog, but a lot of the same things went into this. Specific to that organization in terms of the structure, the sizing, the modals, the components, the layouts, things like that. And this also was an internal design system for the internal applications for a particular airline. Switching slides here. All right, so this next section, we want to talk about what's the real value. So we already know there's value, right, in the design system in terms of scalability, reusability, things like that. But there's also business and tangible money benefits to this as well. If you need to build a case to bring a design system into your organization, and Suresh is going to take back over and talk a little bit about this section.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Adam. So yeah, as you see here, this one just touches upon everything that we discussed, right? In terms of its increased velocity and time to market. So if you're really working on a pressing feature that the market needs right now, consider COVID, for example, right? Nobody expected it, and all the airlines were really, struggling to automate some of the canceling features and all that, because every time you try to reach out to them to cancel, it goes through the customer service, agent, and then they would go through documentation, whatnot, right? So it was not an easy process, and nobody anticipated, this COVID need. Imagine, right? So from a UI perspective, we have this design system in place. It's really about, getting things as fast as we can from a UI perspective to make it to life, right? So you don't really have to spend or carve out a bunch of your time to focus on the designs that's needed, to focus on the development that's needed, right? So it really increases velocity because it's pretty much out there, and it's to the point of just grabbing all the assets that's needed for you to make a page, right, as required from a UI dev perspective. So and it definitely increases the product value because it creates a consistent look and feel across the app, across the product that the organization provides, and across scales, the different viewports and all that. So the consistency definitely increases the efficiency of the user, which in turn increases the product or brand value, and it does increase collaboration and knowledge sharing because no one is going to work in silos, right? So everyone is going to be working based off on the design system, so everybody knows what a component should be, what a component should not be, or can or cannot do, and all that stuff, right? So it is definitely increasing the collaboration and knowledge sharing across people, across individual of the organization, which all adds to the less time and money wasted, right? So you don't really have to reinvent the wheel for every problem that you are trying to solve, right? So if things exist, it just makes it easier. You don't have to spend time in recreating the code, from the dev perspective, recreating the pattern from the design perspective. It definitely saves a lot of money there. And I just added a figure.
Sorry, having some technical difficulty here. Can you guys hear me on your end? The moderators on the behind the scenes here? Okay, so let's give Suresh a minute to log back in here. But yeah, some of the benefits that Suresh was talking about was increased velocity and time to market, increased product value, increased collaboration and knowledge sharing, and less time and money wasted. By having consistency in a system, you spend a lot less time designing and recreating, artifacts and assets from a design or development perspective. So as much as possible, right? If you've kept your design system up to date, you gain a lot of benefits from this perspective. So some interesting fun calculation, pretty high level here is, there's the idea of discovery, designing and developing. So before a design system, generically at $50 an hour, you might spend, $400, the $400 for the designer, to design upwards to $2,000. And so you're looking at, and 80 hours for the front developer is $8,400. And that's because there's a lot of things to do there that they're doing from scratch, for example. But after a design system, we drop significantly, $5,000 to $6,000 here, because what we've done is now that we have all of our usable assets and components across the different folks involved in the creation aspects, right? In theory, and this model might look different depending on the company or the product that you're using and things like that. But as a general rule of thumb, you are saving actual money by having a design system in place, right? And gaining a return on investment by implementing it. So again, it looks like generically here, 82% cost savings if you were to implement one. Now, there probably is an upfront cost, and an investment to be had in creating a design system. They are big systems to create. They typically exist in more design mature organizations, which I believe earlier in the deck we talked about design maturity. But that's what we have for you today. So I can entertain any questions you all have. And thanks for joining us.
Adam, as of right now, I don't see any questions. If we want to just give it a minute for people to respond.
Sure.
It looks like there aren't any. Do you want to wait another minute?
Okay.
Or...
Yeah, we can wait one more minute. Otherwise, my email is here for those of you that are on the call. Feel free to email me with any questions you have. If you're interested in learning more about design systems, we're happy to chat.
Great. Okay. Well, again, this will be available on demand, and we will be sending it out to all of the attendees. Oh, it looks like we got one. Okay. Why should companies invest in a design system for internal applications versus consumer-facing applications?
Well, to me, that's it's important because if your application is external, right? Obviously, you're creating products, right? And you want those products to be on brand, consistent, usable, and be easy to create and innovate and bring to market things quicker. But the same is said, about your internal organization, right? So think about all the applications that you may use day to day, from one software package to another, right? Internally, right? It's onboarding is a big use case, right? So bringing someone into an organization and being able to upskill them quickly on applications when you're switching from one system to another system can be very, very obtrusive. I've been in organizations. For example, I did a redesign of a big healthcare claims processing set of applications. I had to do a bunch of contextual inquiries for that organization, and most of their applications were in-house custom developed, right? And I noticed that they were using upwards to 9 to 15 different applications, and they all looked different because the different development teams used them, right? And then what happened is the training phase to bring on a new claims adjuster, for example, right? Imagine you calling in and talking to someone about your benefits, and behind the scenes, you don't realize it, but they're using probably 2 monitors, right, that maybe aren't that big, and they have 10 to 15 different portals that have different functions and features, and the search works differently across all of them, right? And then they're trying information for you. And you probably had a poor experience, right, with a lot of customer service type applications, right? So, this could be used for HR, for finance, but, even the internal customer experience departments and all the custom applications they may be using, it's really important in those perspectives to have a consistent look and feel and way that things work, just so that you can provide a good experience not only to your employees but to the people that your employees are supporting for the products that they might be using.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Adam. And it does look like that was the last question for the morning. So,
okay, well, thank you, everyone.
Great.
Go ahead, Valerie.
That's okay. That concludes today's webinar. A big thank you to the presentation team today and to the attendees. Thank you for your time and opportunity to come together. With that, we'll turn you back to your day. Thank you.